The day humanity revealed its warships to the galaxy was a moment that would be remembered for millennia. For centuries, the alien empires had squabbled and fought, each convinced of their own supremacy. The Tauride Empire, the once undisputed ruler of vast stretches of space, had long viewed itself as the apex predator among the stars. Their starships were sleek and deadly, their soldiers fanatically loyal, and their technology advanced beyond most races' comprehension. But when the human armada emerged from the depths of the Sol system, all that arrogance crumbled in an instant. As the sleek human warships emerged, it became clear that a new power had arisen, one that would reshape the very fabric of the cosmos. The Taurite king, Prior, a ruler known for his unyielding confidence and iron fist, felt fear for the first time in his long reign. The sight of the human fleet was like nothing he had ever imagined, a vast, coordinated force, with ships that bristled with weapons and a silent, ominous power. Their designs were alien even to the Taurites, with angular hulls and weapon systems that seemed to hum with barely contained energy. In desperation, King Prior dispatched his most trusted diplomat, Prince Zorax, to treat with the humans and discern their intentions. Zorax was known throughout the galaxy for his wit and diplomatic prowess, and if anyone could broker a peace or at least a truce, it was him. However, as Zorax's shuttle docked with the human flagship, the UNSS Dauntless, he found himself face to face with a battle-hardened warrior who had no intention of bowing to alien demands. Admiral Mark Webb was not what Zorax had expected. There was a cold, calculating look in his eyes, a sense of unshakable resolve that sent a chill down the prince's spine. Webb wasted no time with pleasantries. "Humanity will take its rightful place among the stars," he declared, his voice as cold as the void between the stars. "No longer will we be content as minor players in galactic affairs. We will reshape the very foundations of interstellar politics and commerce, and any who stand in our way will be swept aside." Zorax, who had met and negotiated with some of the most fearsome beings in the galaxy, felt a rare pang of fear. He tried to maintain his composure, but Webb's words had struck a chord. The human fleet, stretching out as far as the eye could see, was a testament to their newfound power, and Zorax knew with grim certainty that this was only the beginning. The prince departed the Dauntless with a heavy heart, his mind racing with the implications of what he had just witnessed. As he watched the mighty human fleet recede into the distance, a cold dread settled in his heart. He knew that the galaxy was on the precipice of a new era, one where humanity would play a dominant role, and the future of all races would be decided by the actions of these upstart humans and their unmatched technology. Zorax's report to his father was somber and filled with an underlying tone of hopelessness. King Prior, upon hearing the news, was silent for a long time, his mind turning over the possibilities. He knew that a direct confrontation with humanity would be disastrous, but he could not allow the Tauride Empire to be overshadowed. Thus, he began to plot and scheme, reaching out to other alien empires, hoping to form an alliance strong enough to counter the human threat. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the seeds of conflict were beginning to take root. In the shadows, hidden forces were scheming and preparing, ready to seize advantage in the coming chaos. The Sirius Confederation, a powerful alliance of star systems known for their trade and technology, began to quietly strengthen their defenses. The Alderaan Alliance, a coalition of warrior races, started stockpiling weapons and fortifying their worlds. Everyone could feel the tension in the air, a cold war on the brink of turning hot. And at the center of it all was Earth, a planet that had once been considered a backwater by the galactic powers, but was now poised to lead the way, for good or ill. In the heart of the human territories, a different kind of war was being waged. Ambassador John Hawkins, a charismatic and shrewd diplomat, found himself at the center of a web of intrigue and deceit. Hawkins had secured the support of the Sirius Confederation and Alderaan Alliance through a combination of negotiation and calculated charm, but he knew that the true test of his skills was yet to come. On the shadowed streets of Sirius Prime, Hawkins met with a hooded figure, an operative of the enigmatic spy network known as Ghost. The operative passed him a data crystal filled with critical intelligence on Taurite supply lines and troop movements. Hawkins slipped the crystal into his pocket, his mind already racing with possibilities. Across the galaxy, the Taurite Princess Zara stood before Emperor Darth in the grand throne room of the Orcs Imperium. Her eyes blazed with fierce determination as she laid out her case for an alliance. "The humans are a threat to us all," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "Only together can we hope to stand against their aggression." Darth, a massive figure whose very presence filled the throne, leaned forward. "And what would the Taurite Empire offer in return for our support?" Zara smiled a cold, calculated smile. "Access to our biological weaponry research. With your armada and our plagues, we will bring the humans to their knees." As these alliances were being forged, the galaxy was already on the brink of open warfare. On the battlefields of Keldor Prime, the sounds of war echoed across the rugged landscape. Human-backed rebels clashed with Taurite loyalists in a brutal struggle for control of the planet's vital mineral resources. Among the rebels was a grizzled veteran known as Marcus Rain, who led a daring raid on a Taurite supply depot. As the rebels fought their way into the heart of the enemy base, Rain couldn't shake the feeling that they were all pawns in a much larger game. In the depths of a secret research facility on Earth, Dr. Elias Verhoeven stared at the glowing readouts of his latest experiment. The breakthrough in quantum computing he had long sought was finally within reach, a development that could turn the tide of the Cold War in humanity's favor. But as he worked feverishly to complete his research, Verhoeven couldn't shake the sense that he was being watched. And in the shadows, the broker smiled. The pieces were falling into place, the puppets dancing to the tune of an unseen master. As Prince Zorax and Ambassador Hawkins prepared for their clandestine meeting, the broker knew that the true game was only just beginning. For in the chaos of the Cold War there was opportunity, and the broker intended to seize it at any expense. On the neutral world of Adonia 6, Zorax and Hawkins met in a nondescript building, their respective security chiefs watching the perimeter with hawkish gazes. As they settled into the Spartan conference room, Zorax's trusted advisor, General Jorhan, and Hawkins's chief of security, Captain Steele, took up positions on either side of the door, hands resting on their holstered sidearms. Zorax leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Ambassador, I'm sure you're aware of the severity of our situation. This Cold War between our peoples threatens to ignite into a conflagration that will consume the galaxy." Hawkins nodded, his eyes hard. "Indeed, which is why I find myself here in this room with you. I suspect you have a proposal." The Taurite prince took a deep breath. "I do. I believe it's time for a change in leadership within the Taurite Empire. My father's aggressive policies will only lead to ruin. I propose a coup to install a more moderate government, one willing to negotiate with humanity." Hawkins raised an eyebrow. "A bold plan, and you seek our support in this endeavor?" Zorax confirmed. "With your covert assistance, intelligence, resources, tactical support, I believe we can achieve a swift and bloodless transition of power. In return, I will ensure that the new Taurite government works towards a peaceful resolution to our conflict." The human ambassador steepled his fingers, considering. "There would have to be conditions, guarantees, but I believe this may be our best chance for peace. I will need to consult with my superiors, but I believe we can come to an arrangement." Suddenly, the building shook as an explosion ripped through the lower levels. Alarms blared as General Jorhan and Captain Steele drew their weapons, moving to shield their charges. Hawkins and Zorax locked eyes, realization dawning. Someone had betrayed their meeting. "We need to move now," Steele barked, already heading for the door. Jorhan nodded grimly, following close behind as they hustled the delegates out of the room and down a smoke-filled corridor. In the chaos, Hawkins caught a glimpse of dark-clad figures moving through the haze, weapons at the ready. The broker's agents, he realized with a chill. They were trying to eliminate both him and Zorax to stop their alliance before it could begin. Steele returned fire, covering their retreat, while Joran shoved a comlink into Zorax's hand. "Call for extraction!" The Taurite prince fumbled with the device as another explosion rocked the building. Outside, their shuttles waited, engines already idling as the security teams hurried them aboard. Steele and Jorhan continued to lay down covering fire until the last possible second, then leaped into the shuttle just as it lifted off. As they shot into the sky, Hawkins turned to Zorax. "This changes things. Whoever set this up clearly doesn't want peace." Zorax nodded, grim determination etched on his features. "Then we'll just have to be more careful. But mark my words, Ambassador. I will see this through. For the sake of both our peoples, we cannot fail." Hawkins met his gaze, a silent agreement passing between them. The Cold War might have just turned hot, but the stakes were too high for either of them to back down now. The fate of the galaxy rested on the outcome of their covert alliance, and they both knew that the cost of failure would be unimaginable. The shuttle's engines roared as it ascended through the atmosphere of Idonia 6, carrying its precious cargo toward the safety of space. But as they broke through the cloud cover, the danger was far from over. Zorax's heart raced as the sensors lit up, detecting multiple hostile signatures closing in fast. "Incoming fighters!" Captain Steele barked, his voice laced with urgency. The shuttle's pilot, a seasoned veteran of countless skirmishes, didn't need to be told twice. He yanked the controls, sending the shuttle into a series of evasive maneuvers. Outside the viewport, Zorax could see the sleek forms of Taurite and human fighters alike, their engines flaring as they danced a deadly ballet around the shuttle. "They're trying to intercept us before we can reach the fleet," Hawkins muttered, his expression grim. Steele nodded, his fingers flying over the controls as he activated the shuttle's limited defensive systems. "We won't make it at this rate. We need backup." Hawkins grabbed the comlink. "This is Ambassador Hawkins, Priority Alpha 1. We're under attack and need immediate assistance. Dispatch fighters to our location and inform the fleet to prepare for combat." His voice was calm, but there was a steeliness to it that brooked no argument. The response was immediate. "Acknowledged, Ambassador. Reinforcements en route. Hold tight." As the shuttle weaved and dodged, Zorax couldn't help but marvel at the human's composure. Hawkins had faced death many times before, that much was clear. But what struck Zorax was not just the ambassador's bravery, but the underlying determination that seemed to drive him. The same determination that he saw in Admiral Webb, and that he had come to recognize as a hallmark of humanity. It was a quality that both intrigued and terrified him. The first of the reinforcements arrived in the form of a squadron of human interceptors, their sleek, angular shapes cutting through the void like knives. They engaged the hostile fighters with ruthless efficiency, their weapons spitting fire that tore through enemy hulls. "They're good," Zorax muttered, watching as the human pilots pressed the attack with relentless precision. Steele glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The best. But as the shuttle drew closer to the safety of the fleet, a new threat emerged. A massive Taurite battlecruiser, its guns bristling with firepower, loomed on the horizon. "They're going to try and take us out before we can dock," Steele said, his voice tense. "We need to run the gauntlet." Zorax's eyes widened as the battlecruiser opened fire, its massive cannons hurling energy beams that sliced through the void. The shuttle rocked as the shields absorbed the brunt of the first volley, but it was clear they wouldn't hold for long. "Get us out of here," Hawkins ordered, his voice tight with strain. The pilot pushed the engines to their limits, the shuttle's frame vibrating with the strain. The human interceptors formed up around them, providing cover as they made a desperate dash for the fleet. But the Taurite battlecruiser was relentless, its guns spitting fire with terrifying accuracy. The shuttle took a direct hit, and alarms blared as the shields failed. "We've lost shields!" the pilot yelled, struggling to keep the shuttle steady. "Hull breach imminent." Just as all seemed lost, a massive shadow loomed over the shuttle. The UNSS Dauntless, the human flagship, had arrived. Its enormous guns roared to life, unleashing a torrent of firepower that forced the Taurite battlecruiser to break off its attack. The shuttle lurched as it was caught in the Dauntless's tractor beam, pulling it toward the safety of the hangar bay. "We're clear," Steele breathed, slumping back in his seat with a mix of relief and exhaustion. As the shuttle touched down in the hangar, medical teams and security personnel were already rushing forward. Hawkins turned to Zorax, his expression unreadable. "We made it, but this is just the beginning. The fact that they were willing to risk everything to take us out means that they're desperate. Desperate enemies are dangerous enemies." Zorax nodded, his mind racing with the implications. The broker's agents had clearly been behind the attack, but what was their ultimate goal? To eliminate the possibility of peace? Or was there something more at play? As he followed Hawkins out of the shuttle, his thoughts were interrupted by the sight of Admiral Webb, flanked by a squad of heavily armed Marines. Ambassador Prince Zorax, Webb greeted them with a curt nod. "I'm glad to see you both made it out in one piece." His gaze shifted to Zorax, and the Taurite prince could feel the weight of the Admiral's scrutiny. "We received your request for assistance," Webb continued, his tone cool and professional. "But before we proceed with any further negotiations, I need to know exactly what happened down there, and why the hell the broker is so interested in our little chat." Zorax hesitated, then nodded. "It appears that someone within my own government, or perhaps an outside force, is determined to prevent any kind of alliance between our peoples. The broker's agents were involved, which suggests that this conspiracy runs deeper than we initially thought." Webb's expression hardened. "The broker has been a thorn in our side for too long. If they're involved, it means they're playing a dangerous game, one that could plunge the entire galaxy into war." He turned to Hawkins. "We need to move quickly. If the broker's agents are working against us, we have to assume that they're already several steps ahead." Hawkins nodded. "Agreed. We'll need to step up our efforts to identify and neutralize their operations. And we'll need to do it quietly. If word gets out that the broker is involved, it could cause panic, or worse, spark a preemptive strike from one of the other powers." As the three men stood in the hangar bay, the atmosphere was tense, charged with the weight of what was to come. The Cold War that had simmered for so long was on the verge of boiling over, and the fragile peace that had held the galaxy together was beginning to unravel. In the distance, the rest of the human fleet was mobilizing, preparing for the possibility of all-out war. Zorax knew that his own people would be doing the same, and that the days ahead would be fraught with peril. But as he looked into the eyes of his human counterparts, he also saw a glimmer of hope. Despite the odds, despite the treachery and the danger that surrounded them, there was a chance, a slim, fragile chance, that they could still avert disaster. It would take all of their combined strength, cunning, and resolve, but Zorax was determined to see it through, for the sake of his people, for the sake of the galaxy, and for the future that might still be within their grasp. As Zorax, Hawkins, and Webb moved to the briefing room, the galaxy continued to turn, unaware of the titanic forces being set into motion. But in the shadows, the broker watched, a smile playing at the corners of their lips. The game was far from over, and the next move was theirs. The briefing room aboard the UNSS Dauntless was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. It was a place of calm, where strategy was forged and decisions with galaxy-shaping consequences were made. Zorax, Hawkins, and Webb took their seats around the large holographic table, the room dimly lit by the glow of various star systems projected above it. Admiral Webb wasted no time. "Prince Zorax, we need to know everything you can tell us about the broker. We've tangled with their agents before, but they've always been elusive. If they're pulling strings at this level, we need to understand their endgame." Zorax leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he considered how much to reveal. The broker was a name whispered in the darkest corners of Taurite society, a figure as mysterious as they were powerful. Few knew their true identity or motives, but their influence was undeniable. "The broker is not a person," Zorax began slowly, "but an organization, an intelligence network that spans the galaxy. They deal in information, manipulation, and control. Their agents are everywhere, often without even knowing it themselves, and their loyalty is only to their own agenda." Hawkins frowned. "But what is that agenda? Why would they want to sabotage a potential alliance between our peoples?" "Power," Zorax replied simply. "The broker thrives on chaos. The more unstable the galaxy, the more they can exploit the situation to their advantage. An alliance between humans and Taurites would bring a level of stability that threatens their operations. It would unite two of the most powerful factions in the galaxy, making it harder for the broker to manipulate events behind the scenes." Webb rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "So they're not just trying to stop the alliance, they're trying to maintain the status quo, keep everyone at each other's throats so they can continue to profit." Exactly, Zorax confirmed. They're playing a long game, one that has been in motion. Hawkins glanced at Webb, then back at Zorax. So what's our next move? If the broker is as entrenched as you say, we can't just go after them directly. We need to outmaneuver them. Webb nodded in agreement. We need to play their game. Use misdirection, deception, and strike where they least expect it. But first we need to secure this alliance. Without it, we're fighting with one hand tied behind our backs. Zorax tapped the table, bringing up a holographic display of Taurite space. There's one location where we might be able to do that, a place where we can meet in secret, away from prying eyes. It's a remote station, long abandoned but still operational. It was a research outpost during the early days of our expansion, but now it's little more than a relic. No one would think to look for us there. Webb studied the map. It's deep in Taurite territory. If the broker has agents in your government, they'll be watching your movements closely. How do we get you there without tipping them off? Zorax smiled, a cunning glint in his eye. Leave that to me. I'll leak false information through my contacts, make it appear that I'm headed in the opposite direction. By the time they realize the truth, we'll be long gone. Hawkins nodded, his mind already racing with the possibilities. We can have a small task force on standby, ready to move at a moment's notice. If the broker makes a move, we'll be ready. Webb stood, his presence commanding. Then it settled. We'll proceed with the plan, but be warned, if this fails, it could plunge us into open war. We need to be absolutely certain that we're not walking into a trap. Zorax rose as well, meeting Webb's gaze with determination. I understand the risks, Admiral, but this is our best chance. If we succeed, we can change the course of history. If we fail, he didn't need to finish the sentence. The weight of the mission hung heavy in the air, but there was no turning back now. The stakes were too high, and the alternative too dire. The abandoned research station Zorax had mentioned was an eerie, desolate place. It floated in the void of space, far from any inhabited systems, its dark hull barely distinguishable from the surrounding emptiness. The station had been dormant for decades, its halls silent and cold, forgotten by all but a few. But now, it would become the stage for a meeting that could change the fate of the galaxy. Zorax's ship approached the station cautiously, its sensors scanning for any signs of life or activity. The readings came back clear. The station was exactly as he had expected, lifeless, untouched. He guided his vessel into the docking bay, the doors creaking open as the ship settled into place. As the airlock hissed open, Zorax stepped out onto the cold metal floor, his breath visible in the frigid air. The station's power was minimal, just enough to keep the life support systems functional. He could hear the distant hum of machinery, a reminder that the station was still alive, though barely. He made his way through the darkened corridors, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every corner a potential threat. But Zorax was not afraid. He had lived through worse, seen horrors that would break lesser beings. This station, with all its ghosts, was nothing compared to the battles he had fought. Reaching the control center, Zorax activated the main systems, bringing the station to life. The lights flickered on, revealing the dusty consoles and forgotten equipment. He quickly set about establishing a secure communication link with the Dauntless. This was the moment of truth. If the broker had been fooled by his ruse, the humans should arrive soon, undetected. Minutes later, the secure channel opened, and Admiral Webb's face appeared on the screen. "We're in position," Webb said, his voice steady. "No signs of any broker activity. Are you sure this place is secure?" "As sure as I can be," Zorax replied. "The broker's agents won't find us here, but we can't stay long. The longer we wait, the greater the risk." "Understood. We'll begin the negotiations as soon as our delegation arrives. We need to make this quick." Zorax nodded, his eyes scanning the control center for any anomalies. "Agreed. Let's hope this goes smoothly. Our people have been at odds for too long. We need this alliance now more than ever." Webb's expression softened slightly, a rare moment of shared understanding between the two leaders. "We do, for the sake of both our civilizations." The Dauntless's shuttle arrived at the station a short while later, carrying Hawkins and a small group of diplomats. As they stepped onto the station, the sense of foreboding was palpable. The ancient structure seemed to breathe with a life of its own, as if aware of the importance of the events unfolding within its walls. Hawkins and Zorax met in the control center, where the negotiations were to take place. The tension was thick as they exchanged formalities. "Let's begin," Hawkins said, breaking the silence. "We've come too far to let old grudges stand in the way. The threat we face from the broker is too great. We need to unite or we risk losing everything." Zorax leaned forward, his tone firm. "I agree. Our peoples have clashed in the past, but we are more alike than we are different. We both value strength, honor, and survival. These are the principles that must guide our alliance." The negotiations that followed were intense, with both sides making their cases, arguing over terms, and seeking common ground. Old wounds were reopened, but also the possibility of healing. As the hours passed, the atmosphere shifted from one of confrontation to one of collaboration. Gradually, the seeds of trust began to take root. But as the discussions reached a critical point, an alarm suddenly blared through the station. Red lights flashed, and the sound of systems coming online echoed through the halls. Zorax and Hawkins exchanged a glance, both instantly on high alert. "What is it?" Hawkins demanded, turning to one of his aides. "We're picking up energy signatures. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace nearby," the aide reported, his voice tight with urgency. "It's them, the broker's fleet." Zorax's eyes narrowed. "They found us. We need to move now," Webb's voice crackled over the comms. "We're detecting the same signatures. They're converging on your position. Get out of there." But before anyone could respond, the station shuddered violently, the sound of explosions reverberating through the structure. The broker's ships had begun their assault, and the station was their target. "Evacuate!" Zorax shouted, grabbing Hawkins by the arm. "We need to get back to our ships." The group scrambled out of the control center, the station rocking under the onslaught. Zorax and Hawkins led the way, their instincts honed by years of combat guiding them through the twisting corridors. But as they neared the docking bay, the situation grew more dire. The broker's forces were already boarding the station, cutting off their escape routes. Zorax skidded to a halt, his mind racing. "We're not going to make it to the ships in time. We need another way out." Hawkins glanced around, his sharp eyes catching sight of a maintenance hatch leading to the lower levels of the station. "There," he pointed. "That might take us to the escape pods." Without hesitation, they pried the hatch open and climbed down, the sounds of the battle fading as they descended into the station's underbelly. The lower levels were even more decrepit than the rest of the station, with crumbling walls and malfunctioning systems. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that their survival and the fate of their alliance depended on it. Reaching the escape pod bay, they quickly assessed the situation. Most of the pods were inoperable, but a few still had power. Zorax quickly input the launch codes, and the pods hissed open. "Get in!" he ordered, ushering the diplomats into the pods. "We'll cover you." Hawkins and Zorax stood back, weapons drawn, as the diplomats hurried into the pods. The broker's forces were closing in, their presence a dark shadow looming over them. The station groaned under the strain, the sound of metal tearing filling the air. Just as the last pod launched, the broker's agents burst into the bay, weapons blazing. Zorax and Hawkins returned fire, their shots precise and deadly. But they were outnumbered, and the situation was rapidly deteriorating. "Go!" Zorax shouted to Hawkins. "I'll hold them off." Hawkins hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Don't die on me, Prince." With that, he dove into the last remaining pod and slammed the hatch shut. The pod launched just as the broker's agents swarmed Zorax, their weapons trained on him. But Zorax didn't flinch. He fought with the ferocity of a cornered beast, buying time for the pod to escape. As the pod rocketed away from the station, Hawkins watched through the viewport as the ancient structure was consumed by fire. His heart pounded in his chest, the weight of what they had just been through settling over him like a shroud. He knew the battle was far from over. The broker had made their move, and now it was up to him, Webb, and the remnants of their forces to regroup and strike back. The alliance had survived, barely, but the real war was only just beginning. In the distance, as Hawkins's escape pod hurtled through space, a solitary figure watched the station burn. The broker had underestimated the humans and their new Tauride allies, but they would not make the same mistake twice. The game was far from over, and the next move would be theirs. The escape pod's thrusters burned bright, propelling it away from the station's fiery remains. Inside, Hawkins struggled to catch his breath, his mind racing with the chaos they had just escaped. He was alone now, the pod's cramped interior offering little comfort. The gentle hum of the pod's systems was a stark contrast to the deafening roar of the battle left behind. Come on, he muttered, tapping the pod's communication console. It flickered to life, and after a few agonizing moments, a connection was established with the Dauntless. "Dauntless, this is Hawkins," he said, his voice tense. "I'm in the last escape pod. What's your status?" Admiral Webb's voice crackled through the speaker, laced with relief. "Hawkins! We've been tracking your pod. The rest of the delegation made it to safety, and we're en route to pick you up. The broker's fleet is pulling back, but they've left us a mess to clean up." "Zorax?" Hawkins asked, though he feared the answer. There was a pause before Webb responded. "We lost contact with him when the station went down. We have to assume the worst." Hawkins closed his eyes, the weight of Zorax's sacrifice settling heavily on his shoulders. The Taurite Prince had given them a chance, and now it was up to Hawkins and the others to make sure it wasn't in vain. "Understood," Hawkins replied quietly. "What's our next move?" "We'll rendezvous with the rest of the fleet and regroup," Webb said. "The brokers made it clear they won't stop until we're either broken or united. We need to reinforce our defenses and prepare for the next attack. And we'll make sure Zorax's people know what he did for us." Hawkins nodded, though Webb couldn't see him. "I'll see you on board, Admiral." As the transmission ended, Hawkins leaned back in his seat, staring out at the stars. The escape pod continued its journey, guided by the beacon of the Dauntless. In the vastness of space, Hawkins felt the enormity of the conflict ahead. The broker was a relentless adversary, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Zorax had believed in this alliance, and so did he. It was more than a strategic necessity. It was a chance for something greater, a unity that could stand against the darkness threatening to consume them all. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Admiral Webb watched as the escape pod neared their position. The crew was already preparing for the next steps, their movements efficient and practiced. Webb had seen many battles in his time, but this one felt different. The stakes were higher, the enemy more cunning, and the alliance more fragile. "Status report," Webb ordered, his voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the bridge. "Fleet is holding position, sir," one of the officers reported. "Damage to our ships is minimal, but the broker's forces inflicted significant damage on the station before retreating. We've lost contact with several scout vessels, likely taken out during the engagement. Any sign of pursuit?" Webb asked, his eyes narrowing. "Negative, Admiral. It seems the broker's fleet is regrouping, possibly preparing for another strike." Webb nodded, his mind already working through the possibilities. "Keep the fleet on high alert. I want scouts out in all directions. If the broker is planning another attack, I want to know about it before they get within striking distance." The officer nodded and turned back to his console, issuing the necessary commands. As Webb continued to survey the situation, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The broker had been pushed back, but they were far from defeated. And with Zorax gone, the alliance was vulnerable. "We'll make it through this," Webb muttered to himself, his resolve hardening. "We have to." Deep within the wreckage of the station, Zorax stirred. His vision was blurry, and his body ached from the impact of the explosions. For a moment, he wasn't sure if he was alive or dead, but the sharp pain in his side quickly reminded him that he was still very much alive. Groaning, he pushed himself up from the twisted metal and debris that had shielded him from the worst of the blast. The station was in ruins, its once majestic structure now reduced to a twisted, smoldering shell. But somehow Zorax had survived. He wasn't alone. Through the smoke and wreckage, he could see movement, figures emerging from the shadows, their intentions unclear. With a grimace, Zorax reached for his weapon, ready to fight if necessary. But as the figures drew closer, he realized they weren't broker agents. They were scavengers, likely drawn to the wreckage by the hope of finding something of value. When they saw Zorax, they hesitated, clearly unsure of what to make of the battered Taurite prince. "You there," Zorax called out, his voice hoarse. Help me get out of here and I'll make it worth your while." The scavengers exchanged glances before one of them stepped forward, a wary elf.